I can read your mind like a book. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 172nd episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, Sales Whisperer, your host. Today, we've got an interesting character, but I want to tell you first about two things that are live right now. Number one is the Make Every Sale program. I am adding more and more content to it. The price is going up, so hurry up and enroll. It's at makeeverysale.com. And then also, I've partnered with a couple of good friends of mine, some very smart marketers and entrepreneurs, and they are helping me roll out the Market Like a Man program, marketlikeaman.com. If that name offends you, then you may need to enroll sooner rather than later. If it does not offend you, then you're our kind of people. So check that out at marketlikeaman.com. Today we have Mr. Ian Rowland. He is joining us from overseas, across the pond, from the UK. And I ran across him years ago, a good friend of mine who has since left this world. May he rest in peace, Mr. Michael Kenyon. Great dude. He was an entertainer. He turned me on to Ian, who wrote a book called The Full Facts Book of Cold Reading. The name was intriguing. You know, being in sales and also being strong in my faith, I was always wondering, what's up with these psychics and whatever. And he makes no bones about it. He does this as entertainment. He says there is no psychic abilities out there. And he showed in detail what a cold reading is, the many different ruses and gambits that they use. And so it was interesting to me, again, from a faith perspective, to get a little more reassurance that stuff is fake. But it was also interesting from a human being, human connection standpoint on how to bond, honestly, with people. Things you can use in a networking situation, at trade shows, even on the phone. Things you can do to help break down barriers with people and build, what I call the better prospecting system: bonding, empathy, trust, and rapport. Something that I get into in the Make Every Sale program. And I've learned a good bit from Ian, so it was great. I reached out to him earlier in 2015 on Facebook. I found him, actually, and then it took a few months to have him come on. He actually created a very nice, very handy free report that we mention at the end of this episode, and there's a promo code. We can get it for free. Sells it for £50, so that's not a small chunk of change, but he gives it to us free, everyone listening to this. And you can listen as well, or visit thesaleswhisperer.com/session 172 for the show notes and for a link to the free report along with the promo code. So without further ado, let's bring on Mr. Ian. Ian Rowland, mind reading specialist, sort of, kind of, all the way from the UK. Welcome to the Sales Podcast. How are you?
I'm very well. It's very nice to be part of this. Thank you for the invitation. And we can talk about some cool stuff, some interesting stuff.
Famous last words when people tell me they're ready. Well, I will link to your bio in the show notes on this, but without reading it completely, would you mind take a minute or two, kind of tell us about yourself, and for those that may not be familiar with you, and then we'll dive down the rabbit hole?
Sure, that's a good plan. I generally think there's three things that I'll mention. I'm a writer by trade, a writer for hire, freelance writer. I have been for 20, 30 years. But a lot of that was to do with selling and promoting things. Okay. So that's one area. I'm also a trainer these days. I do a lot of corporate training, special events at conferences and things like that. So that's the second thing. I have an e-commerce website, and I sell stuff about cold reading, which is a subject we might want to get onto, and related subjects. And the rest of the time, I have a lot of fun. And, I do a bit of the mind reading stuff. But that's kind of... It's not my job. I just kind of integrate it with the training and the corporate stuff. So that's me. That's me in a minute.
Well, I mean, you're a poor judge of character because you accepted my friendship on Facebook. But despite that shortcoming, so I've got your book here. I bought it many years ago, The Full Facts Book of cold reading. And, myself, I follow a similar path as you. I write, I speak, I train, and I'm always trying to get better. And a good friend of mine recommended this book to me, and I couldn't get it anywhere but your site, so that was interesting. But I got it, and I mean, this thing is dog-eared and well used. I reference it regularly because I'm always looking to have an edge.
Sure.
But for those who are not familiar with cold reading, I mean, can you get into that? Give us maybe a 101 type overview, and then help us understand what made you get into that, because that's not what you do for a living, right?
Okay, so let's take that in order. First of all, what is cold reading? Okay, the simplest way to explain it is this. I think most people have either had the experience or they know someone who has had the experience of going to see someone they regard as a psychic or a tarot card reader or someone like this. And they come back and they say, wow, she was amazing. It's usually she. She was amazing. She told me all kinds of things she could not possibly have known. Da, 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 da. And, for a lot of people, that's real. Now, just setting aside the possibility of genuine psychic phenomena for a moment, that there may be some, I don't know. But most of the people who do this, they're using a technique called cold reading, which is how to talk to a complete stranger as if you know, well, not everything about them, but a lot about them.
Right. And
that's what cold reading is. It's been around as long as people. It goes back through centuries. And it happens to be an interest of mine, being interested in the world of magic and mind reading and mentalism. And as you say, I wrote a book on it a while ago, which it just opened so many doors. It led me to meet lots of interesting people and nice invitations, and go to Caltech and the FBI and people. And it's an interesting subject. But that's just to do with one industry, right? That's for people who want to, for whatever reason, pretend to be psychic. What I did a long time ago, I realized some of these techniques that they use can actually be transplanted, right, over the fence to non-psychic worlds, to business and selling and negotiation and promotion. And this is something which I've been experimenting with for over 20 years now. And over the last 8 years, I've actually been teaching it. And it's just amazing how many parallels there are and how much of an edge it gives you, even outside of the psychic world. So that's what cold reading is. Yeah.
So you had an interest in it. You wrote a book. Now, were you already consulting with the FBI and entities like that, or did they find that book and find you and bring you in?
It all followed on from the book. So much did. It sold all over the world. I'm delighted to say. I had no idea that it was going to do that. And a lot of people referred to it and talked about it. And, it's all word of mouth. All of it is word of mouth. And it led to some nice invitations to talk to people here and there, which obviously I'm delighted about. It's all been fun. I don't regret any of it. It's been great.
Now, so who's buying it? Or is it salespeople like me? Is it tarot card readers and psychics that want to get better, or all the above?
It's a good question to ask, because when I first wrote this, I thought there would be potential for about 50 copies. Okay. It's like that famous quote from some old director of IBM who felt the worldwide market for computers for like 20.
It was like 4 or something, yeah.
So just let me frame this for you. There's only so many magicians in the world, and of all the magicians in the world, there's only a small number that are mentalists who do kind of mind-reading magic, and there's only a small percentage of those who are interested in cold reading. So we're talking about a very small market.
Right.
And I literally, once I got 50 copies printed, I felt that was it. But now I don't know how many copies have been sold, but it's over 50,000. I know that much. And the people who are buying it is everybody, the world and his wife, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, but predominantly people interested in management, sales, negotiation, communication skills, personal skills. A lot of teachers and therapists have bought the book. And also some people who did jobs I didn't even realize existed as jobs. I had a lovely email from a woman in Canada who bought the book, and she told me it's useful in her work as a hand therapist. Now, I don't know what a hand therapist does. Maybe you do. I don't know.
Why don't
but apparently this is his
you
job.
need to ask her.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I did at the time. I feel we had a nice conversation. But, I mean, so many people have found that it helps them in one way or another. But my main focus is the corporate market, because people who use some of these techniques, applied cold reading, so nothing to do with being psychic now, find that it's really, really useful.
Now, did you write it to break the myths and shed light on maybe these people are taking advantage of others, or was it a sales and guide? I mean, what motivated you to even do it?
I'll tell you. At the time, and we're talking around about 1999, 2000, round about there, turn of the second millennium, there were quite a few books and booklets and leaflets and stuff about cold reading around. You wouldn't find them in bookshops, but you would find them in the kind of stores that magicians go to and the kind of places that they order stuff from. But most of them were pretty small, flimsy, tatty old things that had been photocopied for, copies of copies, badly produced and typed and so forth. And what I found was, I'd pick up the first little booklet. There were a couple of good ideas in that one. And then the next little book, there were a couple of good ideas in that one. And the next one, and so on. And I just felt it was time for someone to mush them all together, impose some sort of an order and a structure on them so you could read them in a structured way, and kind of explain the ideas as well as I could. And my background is a professional writer, so I thought I could do it. And that's originally how it started. I just wanted to take the best information and present it in a way that I thought it deserved to be presented, because it wasn't being presented very well. And that was the origins of the book.
So was this just a hobby of yours, like magic and mind reading and whatever?
It was actually my full-time job for, I think, a couple of years, but it's not something I've ever. I didn't see that as my future. So just to put that in perspective, I came out of college. I had about 15 years just in the normal 9-to-5 corporate world that we all know and love so much, with such passion and energy. And I worked in creative media for a while. I worked in IT. I was a sales and marketing guy. And then I just walked out of that. I left it all behind because I just had enough. I just had enough. And that's when I started doing other things and a bit of freelancing and writing books and setting up websites and things. So the mentalism has always been there. I like getting up and doing sort of mind reading shows, like my friend Darren Brown and people like that. But it's never been my full-time job. It's something that I just kind of integrate with the other things I do.
So were you doing it just on stage to entertain, or were you like one-on-one in the little cubicle on the side of the street with the neon lights?
It's a charming image, isn't it? It's a wonderful picture. Maybe I should have done that, but I've never actually been somebody with a little booth giving readings by the side of the street. Mind reading shows, mentalism shows in theaters and at conferences, yeah, and of course informally for friends, but not. I've never been a fortune teller as such.
Right.
A lot of people tell me I could have been, but it's not something I want to do.
Yeah, because you don't pull any punches in the book. You say, hey, yeah, okay, maybe there are a handful in the history of the world that could truly do this, but you don't pull any punches in saying, look, these are just tricks.
Well, it's a way of communicating with people,
right?
That a lot of people get some benefit from. We're talking about this. You really have to kind of divide the page into two. They've got the psychic side and everything else. So on the psychic side, some people get some benefit from it. Some people view it as like a poor man's psychotherapy or whatever. It gives some people some comfort, some hope, whatever. That's one industry. And, we live in a free market economy. If somebody wants to say, I'll tell your fortune, and somebody else wants to buy that, that's their business. But what I was interested in was seeing how you can take some of these techniques and transplant them over the fence into things like, sales and management and negotiation. And they work very well. And when I first started doing this, I was only in my early 20s, and I needed that edge because I was a young guy and I looked it, but I didn't want to come across that way.
Right.
And also this was before the internet. Can we remember that far back, before the internet? Yeah.
No.
Young people need to know this. There was a time before the internet. There was a time before Post-it notes. There was a time before word processors. So it did exist. And this is when I started. I was doing some selling of my company's services at the time. And I knew I was just young. I was green, wet behind the ears. And I wanted an edge. I wanted a way of looking perhaps a bit more credible than I was at the time. And that's when I started thinking, well, I know all about this cold reading stuff and the mentalism stuff and how that works. Maybe I could use some of the same techniques. And it worked very well. And it went on and on from there. And as I say, for about the last 8 years or so, I've been teaching it in classes and in the corporate world.
So what was one of the first things, techniques, tricks, whatever verbiage we want to use? I mean, what was the first thing that you remember using when you were young? You're like, oh, wow, that just worked in this corporate sales environment.
Sure. As I say, I'm talking about a time before Google.
Okay.
Now, when you're selling and you're going to see a prospect, of course, you want to be as well briefed as you can possibly be. Of course, you do your homework, you get your preparation. You want to know about the guy you're going to see, if it is whoever you're going to see, the department they work in, what their company does, their market, their industry, all of this stuff. And usually, that's what I tried to do. There were times when I just couldn't. This was before computers, before the internet, before Google. I was seeing, who knows, 10 different people a week in completely different companies, completely different industries. I could not always be perfectly well briefed.
Right.
But I wanted to sound as if I was.
Okay.
So I started thinking, well, how can I talk to someone about, say, their company or their market or their industry if I don't really know that much, if I don't have much to go on? And that's when the cold reading came in, because that's exactly what your neighborhood psychic does. A complete stranger comes in and she suddenly starts talking about your career and money and health and all of these things, relationships, romance, as if she knows something. Now, she doesn't, between you and me, yeah. But it sounds like she does. I don't want to kill Father Christmas for you and kill the magic, but now, wouldn't
some people say, well, that stuff works in a psychic setting because the person is open and receptive and they want to believe, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas you walk into that conference room and you've got that CEO with his suit on and his arms folded and his brow is furrowed and he's like, I'm not telling you anything, sales guy.
No, it doesn't work that way. I know, first of all, if we go back to the psychic side, I know what you mean about being predisposed to believe. Of course they are. They've chosen to go see a psychic and to pay for it.
Sure.
And usually pay in advance. But, it tends to work on just about anybody who doesn't know what cold reading is.
Sure.
Okay, so when you don't know what it is, it's always going to sound convincing. Now, on the corporate side, I didn't find that there was usually that degree, a kind of a wall or that hostility. And it still works because I'll give you an example. If I've got my nice new suit on and I sit down and I say something that sounds knowledgeable. Now, as I understand it, there's been a lot of consolidation in your market recently, a lot of big fish swallowing up the smaller fish. And this has actually changed quite a lot of your own outlook on your sales and direction. Now, that might sound as if I actually know something. And, 9 times out of 10, I would know what I was talking about. But I'm referring now to the times when I needed an extra edge because for whatever reason, I had to go and see somebody and I wasn't perfectly briefed. Maybe somebody else had been intended to make that call, that visit, and they dropped out, they were ill, whatever. And I had to step in. So I learned how to talk and to say things and to make statements, which is the whole essence of the thing. Statements instead of questions. That's the whole essence of it. That sounded quite plausible, and that to the point was just to build rapport very quickly and to get to take the conversation forward in a way that sounded positive and helpful, as opposed to being polite and saying, terribly sorry, I don't really know much about what you do. Now, that's an option, and I can sit there and ask questions and be polite and do my spin selling and all the rest of it, but the power of making a statement is really quite considerable. And so that's the approach that I also tried. It doesn't take away from the standard kind of selling stuff. That's still on the table. You can still do all that. It's just an extra thing that you can try.
Now, in all of my training, I tell people, whomever is asking the questions is in control of the conversation. But what you're saying with these statements, is that to convey some type of knowledge or expertise, so you're not just walking in there flat and dumb, so that they see you more as that trusted expert?
It's kind of that. The way I would explain it can take several minutes, and we don't want to take up that much time. But when I start off an applied cold reading class, the first thing I do is I talk about a comparison. I have a flip chart or a screen or something. Now, down one side, if you imagine somebody going to see a psychic, and the psychic does one of her lines, oh, somebody close to you has some lower back pain, whatever. In a space of about 10 or 15 seconds, what has she achieved? She has corroborated the belief system that's in place. She has imposed her own status. She has shown empathy and sympathy and understanding for the person she's talking to. She has sounded a positive note. She's done lots of things. There's a whole list. There's like 10, 12 things that she's achieved in terms of building good rapport in like 10 or 15 seconds. Why? Because of the power of making a statement. When I transfer this over to a sales situation, corporate setting, whatever, it's the same thing. There's a tremendous power that comes from saying something, making a statement that the other person will nod and agree with and say, well, yes, actually, as you're right. That's one of the things we've had to take into account. And suddenly the whole conversation has moved forward to a positive place where I can start saying things like, well, that's why I thought we should talk today. But I've done it in an incredibly compressed way. In just 10, 15 seconds, established my own status, established empathy, established understanding, taken it forward in a positive sounding way, showing respect and empathy for the position they're in. It's all about them. It's not about me. It's all about whatever problems and pain they're dealing with. And you're able to do it very, very quickly. Right. I don't really know of a way of doing it more quickly. Well, and I love that example. I always tell people, that as human beings, we're hardwired and we're pretty dang predictable, right? I mean, we push one button, in some ways, yeah. If I hand you, a new ice cold beer, you'll be happy. If I punch you in the nose, you'll be sad. Example I always use, if you come into my store and I say, hey, how can I help you? You're going to say, nah, just looking. But if I say, what brings you in today? You have to engage me, right? Because that little switch. But I mean, these things, it can work in pretty much any business, right? I mean, you could always say, I understand there's been a lot of consolidation, but you could also say, I understand there's been a lot of fragmentation in your industry, or I understand the new laws from Congress are impacting your industry in a lot of ways. I understand that the valuations and currency have impacted your business in a lot of ways. I mean, it's just endless, isn't it? A lot of things, that there are a lot of subjects that you can talk about. There's a lot of ways of making these statements. You mentioned there just retail selling. Somebody walks into a store and you're selling hi-fi or refrigerators or anything. Now, there's a world of difference between saying, can I help you? What are you interested in today? What are you looking for? And saying something like, you've been looking around for a while, haven't you? And just haven't found exactly what you're looking for at the right price. Am I right? And, 9 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a nod. You're going to get a smile, especially if, one partner has obviously been dragging the other around. And they're going to say something like, it just doesn't seem that we found the right thing. Everything's either it's nice, but it's too much, or it's in our budget, but it's not. And you're having a conversation immediately, exactly the conversation you would have if you knew those people, you knew their minds, you knew what they were thinking and feeling at the time. Even though you don't actually have that knowledge, you can still make the statement. And there's a tremendous power to be gained in terms of building rapport from making statements that accurately reflect somebody's pain, whatever is the grit in their shoe, whatever is the cloud in their sky. When you focus on that and you can make good statements about it, you build rapport very quickly. And it's also fun.
So do people just not study this? I mean, I see constantly salespeople, entrepreneurs, that they push back on scripts, or they don't know them, or they get bored. Like, well, I've said the same thing for 5 years. I'm like, does it work? If it works, why change it, right?
Yeah. People do use it. It does work. They do like it. And I've shared this now with, I don't know how many sales professionals, but a lot. I mean, even before I started formally offering training in it, I was the UK head of sales and marketing for a technologies company for a while. And I had a sales team working with me and for me. And this was more or less the first thing I did,
right,
was just say, look, there's this. I'm not taking away any of the techniques you already use. I'm just adding one extra thing. And I sat them down and we trained them in ACR, Applied Cold Reading. And so they started using it. They started sharing it with other people. So even before I was formally offering this, I shared it with a lot of people. And it's just one more tool to use. It's not the answer to everything, but it's just one more technique to use.
Can this work on the phone?
Yeah, it works with any real-time interactive dialogue. I think it works best in person, but people do use it on the phone. It doesn't work so well with things that aren't real-time. Like, people often say, can we use it in emails and letters? A little, but not so much. The power comes from the real-time dialogue.
I've got a instant chat on my website. So that's real time. Should I try some of this with that?
It would work. Whether you want to try it's up to you, but it would work.
I'm always asking people I interview, the difference between persuasion and manipulation. Because I know some people might push back on this. Well, you're pulling their strings, you're manipulating them. I mean, how would you respond to that?
Well, I think it's a good question to ask. The way that I use ACR, I think it's very ethically positive. Now, hang on. People say, well, of course you would say that, wouldn't you, Ian? Yeah, I guess I would. That's true. No, I'm actually an evil, wicked person, and I just like to manipulate people. That's all. No. You see, given that the focus is on empathizing with the other person and thinking to yourself, now, instead of talking about me, let's talk about this person I'm meeting. What problems do they have? What issues are on their mind? What obstacles are they dealing with? What's the pain that they're dealing with? And then saying something that's intelligent and perceptive and shows that you empathize with them and moves it forward in a positive way. I don't think that's a bad thing to do. I think people tend to welcome it. They almost feel verbally hugged, They feel this person understands me, this person gets me, this person sees it from my point of view, this person's taking an interest in me. It feels very nice for people. There's a reason why the psychic industry has been around for a few thousand years. It feels nice to people. It feels good, and they get something from it. So when we're talking about using some of these same techniques in the non-psychic world, I don't see anything questionable about it. I'm building rapport with people very quickly, and I'm training myself to empathize with their point of view, and I'm helping. It's a positive thing.
Yeah, what I've always heard people say is it's really what the focus is, what the purpose is of that method.
The intent. Yeah, the intent. Yeah.
Right. And so, if you have an honest product, with a positive ROI for the consumer, even if it's expensive, right? Even if you're more expensive than the competition, but you deliver value, blah, blah, blah. I always say decision makers, and I use myself as an example. I don't shop very much. I buy. Right? I don't want to go look at your 37,000 options. Give me 3, maybe 2. Tell me why you think those 2 or 3 are best for me. Give me your recommendation. Maybe you choose A. I'll go, okay, thanks. I'm going to choose B. Here's my credit card. People, they need to get things off their plate, and I think we confuse people and delay the process and hurt them because it's like the RAM on a computer. Their RAM is full because they're considering all these things in their lives, and salespeople don't ever help them make a decision and feel confident about it and move on.
You're absolutely right. And what you're talking about there, or one of the things you're referring to there, is a failure to see things from the other person's point of view. It's all very well thinking, I'm doing you a favor by explaining we have 37 different options. But are you really, is that the most helpful thing you can do? Or can you say, understand what their needs are, understand what their aspirations are, and say, okay, A, B, or C is going to be the best thing you're ever going to find.
Right.
But, and I think that the more we can learn, amongst other things, the more we can learn about how to see it through their eyes, to kind of like a ghost or something, is go and sit inside their own head and see the world from their point of view and empathize with that accurately. There's a lot of power from that. There's a lot of good rapport building, which is very, very fast and very effective. And I wouldn't say it if, I hadn't seen this for myself in my own work, but also other people using it. I get correspondence all the time from people who use this. And it's we touched earlier on about, all the different people who are using it. Even some quite mundane examples. One of the best people I ever had on the course, he sold vending machines for a living. That was his job. He went around selling vending machines. And I got so much nice correspondence from him afterwards saying he's now better at selling vending machines to people. They warm to him more. They like him. It's not such a tough sell anymore. And, a woman who runs a health and fitness retreat and financial consultants, all sorts of people, they're using it. And they find it's better for them, but it's better for their customers.
Right. I agree. I always tell people, empathy, I think, is the number one key for top performing salespeople. And it's different than sympathy, right? We're not crawling down in the ditch with them.
No.
We can relate to being in the ditch, and we're going to give them a way to get out of the ditch.
Yeah, I can understand how life looks from your point of view, and I can also focus on some of the grit in your shoe and how we can get rid of it. And this is what on the, as I say, it helps to kind of divide the page. Over on the psychic side, that's what psychics have been doing one way or another for centuries. And now when we can learn from their success, these psychics really are expert salespeople in their own right.
Sure.
When you think what their product is, which is imaginary, but we can use some of the same techniques when we're actually offering genuine value. And it's great for building rapport, and it's great for building understanding, and it's great for good client communications. And I think it helps people to do their job more successfully.
Right. I agree. That's why I wanted to have you on. So now you were
By the way, your copy of the book is out of date. It should look like this now. So I'm going to send you a nice up-to-date version.
Yeah, this is the 4th edition, 3rd printing.
Yeah, we're on to something like 5 or 6 now. But anyway, that's what it looks like these days. And why not? I'll send. It's a Christmas present. I'll send you an up-to-date copy.
All right, I'll take it. Yeah, this says published 2002.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of date. It's been a little bit expanded now.
Oh, good. It's still good.
Thank you.
So you've created a handout for our listeners, and I will not share this unless people listen to it. But you made Sales Secrets of a Mind Reader, right?
I'm the first to admit the title is a little bit playful. Okay,
that's fine.
You have to give it. It's a catchy title. All it is, I write all the time about little kind of conversational tricks or techniques that you can use when you're in meetings and selling that people enjoy using. They're little tools, little tips, little techniques. And I put 13 of them together, and we'll talk about the number in just a moment. It's a booklet. It's on my e-commerce site. People can just download it instantly. But we've put the price as £50. We use pounds over here in Britain. I'm not expecting anybody to actually buy it. They can get it for free if they use the coupon code, which I've given, which is
Wes.
Yeah, it's just your name, WES. Just when they check it out, when you get to the checkout, there's a little space saying coupon code. You just put Wes, and then the price becomes zero. It just becomes nothing, and it's free. So everybody else who doesn't have this podcast will have to actually, if they want to know it, they pay for it. But people watching this podcast and enjoying this podcast and this great series that you put together, they can have it for free. And it's instant. It's just a download straight away. And you've had a look at it, so it's not terrible.
Oh, it's actually really good. So why did you pick 13? Some people would say that's bad luck.
Yes, they would. Well, I'll tell you, and people, when they read this, they'll see this. It was going to be 12, okay? And there's one thing at the end, which we call modal judo, which is actually, it's the only thing in it which you could say, if you really wanted to press me, you could say it's actually a slightly negative tactic. It's a little bit unfair. And that's not what I'm all about. You know, we're all about the hug and the win-win and doing nice, warm things. But just now and again, you might be in a position where somebody's using unfair tactics on you in a meeting or to get their own way. And it's just a lovely way of disrupting their flow and kind of putting a spanner in their mental works. It's the only thing in the booklet that has that slightly negative sound to it. Everything else is very wholesome and positive and nice and rapport and all that jazz. But I figured your listeners or your viewers would allow me just one slightly questionable tactic.
Well, but it is
so
judo.
Well.
It is judo, right? Which is a lot more around using the opponent's momentum against them, right?
It's modal judo. I won't go into it because I think people should read it, but it's a way of just destabilizing somebody else's presentation or pitch, or when they're trying to talk against you. It's a wonderful way of throwing a spanner in the mental works that will just halt them in their tracks. And it doesn't seem like that's what you're doing. It sounds like you're trying to be very helpful. So that's the only one that and that's why it's 13. I just kind of snuck it in at the end. Right. The other 12 are all very nice and friendly and warm and cozy. And it's free, to say. It's free for people who have the coupon code. Yeah.
So that brings up a point. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be at a point in my business where I can tell someone I don't like to go pound sand.
Yep.
So should we even do business with people like that? Maybe in the beginning, maybe if you're new in business or if you need every sale, and I've been there. But, I mean, what's your take on if you need to use something like that, are you better off just walking away, or is this the case where when you do need the sale, go ahead and put up with a hostile person to kind of tone them down?
Well, to be honest about the technique I was just referring to, it was more to do with not so much direct selling or retail, but my background was mainly business-to-business selling. And, you know, there tends to be a whole bunch of meetings in rooms with whiteboards and flip charts and things. And I was just thinking of situations where possibly, I'm the external consultant and my company's kind of going in to see a company to try and do some good work. And maybe somebody within the company isn't being very supportive or isn't being very helpful or is saying, you know what, why do we even need these guys? I'm sure that our team could put this together. Let me show you. And in some cases, that's legitimate. And you listen, and it's a process of negotiation. What can they bring to the table? What can we? And da-da-da-da-da. But just now and again, somebody's playing unfairly. And what they're saying is right, and they're not painting an accurate picture. And that's why you can use this technique to just basically gum up their mind and make sure their whole case just falls apart. It is the last and final thing I put in the booklet. The rest of it's not like that, but it'll probably be the one. It'll probably be the one that people write to me most about.
Well, we do encounter that. I mean, so what you're describing is that complex sale, right? Multiple decision makers, multiple points of input, multiple meetings, so it's more likely than not you're going to have that sharpshooter just pinging away. You're like, where'd you come from?
So it's just anyway. It's just one of the techniques in the book. But yeah, my background is mainly business-to-business selling, so that's the kind of world that I often refer to. But it's again, it's something I've shared with a few people who have written to me saying how much they enjoy using it.
Right. Okay.
It also works on teenagers who won't tidy up their room.
Oh, I'm reading that right now. I have 3 teenagers still at home. 1 visits from college, and then 3 up-and-coming potential teenagers.
That's a lot to deal with. Yeah.
All right. So I will definitely link to that. One thing I've started asking my guests, kind of as a final question is, what's one thing you want our listeners to take away from this? I mean, imagine if most people are like me, which is unfortunate, but if they're like me, they're at the gym, they're driving, they're on a bike ride listening to this, and they, it's like, okay, what do I do when I get home? What do I do when I get back to my desk? So what's something they could kind of hold on to take away from this when they get to their desk that they can use to improve their sales and their business, moving ahead?
Well, apart from, the booklet that I've created just for the Sales Podcast family, it would be that you have an invisible magic sales and persuasion machine and you're not using it well enough. And that magic, invisible sales and persuasion machine is your voice. And I've taught and trained so many people about this. There's a whole thing in the booklet about the science of what's called a vocalics. And a lot of people who want to get ahead and be successful and sell and negotiate very well, they're very good in all sorts of ways. And I say, how much voice training have you done? And they look like me like I'm from Venus or something. Say, well, voice training is for actors and singers, right? I say, no, it's for anybody who wants to communicate successfully and persuasively. And it doesn't cost much, and it's fun to learn about, and you will be using your voice in so many wonderful ways. It is one of the first things that I mentioned in the booklet, and there are there's really nothing negative about this. It's just a marvelous way of becoming a more successful salesperson or persuader or manager or negotiator, and it doesn't cost much. It's easy to do. It's fun to learn, and hardly anybody does it. Right. They say, I've heard about voice, but singers, actors. No, everybody benefits. Yeah. It's a wonderful power to have, a tremendous power to have.
So download the booklet and get voice training.
If you're going to nail me to just 1 or 2 points, I'd say that. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I like to give people 1 or 2 things. That way they can't complain. Oh, you gave me too much to do. So there are 2 things. Well, 3 things. Download the booklet, read the booklet, and get voice training.
Yeah. If people don't read it, they're not going to get a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah. I mean, having it sitting on your hard drive unread will not help very much.
Not a lot. No, not much. That applies to a lot of books, I find. Don't you?
Yeah, amen. Osmosis has not worked very well for me. I have to actually open the things and read them and listen.
I find that trying to absorb texts and books just by using my profound psychic gifts doesn't get me. You actually have to open the thing and read it, or read it on your devices these days. Yeah.
Right. All right, Mr. Ian Rowland, thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast. We'll have links to everything. Your main website is ianrowland.com, right? And
that's all the training stuff that I do. Yeah.
And you also have thecoldreadingconnection.com, and we'll link to all of that, including the free PDF as well. So, thanks for sharing your words of wisdom on the Sales Podcast.
Thank you for having me, and I hope that people enjoy the information. And, thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
I'm sure they will. All right. Cheers.
Thank you.
Sales Secrets of a Mind Reader. Told you it was going to be good. So make sure you visit thesaleswhisper.com/session 172 so you can get the links, and make sure you use the promo code WES so you can download that. And but like we said, and I'm not kidding, download this thing and read it. Read it 5 times, 10 times until you can really internalize it and repeat it and teach someone else. That's when you know you've really mastered it. I see too many people dabbling, and it's these dabblers that just you never hear them. Right? Because they're always nibbling at the fringes and not really focusing and mastering and working on something until it's great and it's excellent and it's memorable and it's worth talking about. I've got on my desk, I've got a Sharpie where I wrote on one of those sticky notes and taped it to my iMac here, and it just says finish in all capital letters, 2 exclamation points and 2 underlines. And that's the goal of anything. You got to finish. If you run halfway up 50 hills, you don't see anything. The view's always the same. So pick one hill and run all the way to the top. Okay? And really, if you're trying to get in shape, you're going to have to run up that same hill a bunch of times to really get in good enough shape to go to the next level. You see that all the time. People that are climbing Mount Everest, they have plateaus or base camps at a lot of different levels. You got to get up there and then acclimate. I think too many people try to go too high too fast. And you're trying to climb, Mount Everest, you're not going to do it. Trying to succeed in business, you're not going to do it. So take the time to master something. And regardless of the ups and downs of the economy and setbacks, even in my own business, it's still up and to the right. Yeah, obviously with some setbacks here and there. But I always said you can't climb a smooth mountain. But I've been able to continuously grow despite being a husband of 20 plus years, 7 kids, big dog. I'm the sole bread earner and have been for the 20 years we've been married. But I've done it because I can sell. From day one, I've been a salesperson. And so the things you will learn in what Ian is providing here will help you write better email copy, even though, like he said, this isn't necessarily stuff you would use in an email. The thinking, the empathy that he talked about. Empathy is the number one key attribute of top salespeople. So learning what he teaches will give you better empathy. It'll help you write better headlines, better email. It'll certainly help you on the phone. It'll help you from the stage if you're presenting or selling. It'll help you on webinars. It'll help you one-on-one. It'll help you in a group environment where so many people I see get nervous. They don't know what to do at a trade show, at a networking event, at a chamber of commerce function. So figure this stuff out. And when you get free tools like this, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, all right? Download it and read it because he may not give it away for free forever. And I've got it, and it is good stuff. And I've got his book, and he did send me his second book, his updated book, the second edition. So he's a man of his word. And, those are the kind of people I have on the show. So, again, you can get the links to everything and the promo code at thesaleswhisperer.com/session 172. And if you need some help getting stuff done, join the Market Like a Man program. Check it out at marketlikeaman.com. And as always, remember to sell different.